Sometimes I think about some of the ridiculous things people have said to me over the years. Think about some of the ridiculous things theists regularly say to atheists. They say things like, if there's no God and no afterlife, then why does anything matter? It's all meaningless. If there's no God, then why not rape and kill and steal? Atheists are so arrogant, they say. Atheists are religious and have faith too, they say. If you recognize that it's bad to be religious, then why are you so religious? Why are you always arguing that the world needs religion? Why are you using faith as an insult? Of course, God has been used to justify killing, raping, and stealing, all of which can be forgiven by God, and such behavior manifests in reality with atheists committing far fewer of these acts than the religious. Of course, it takes quintessential arrogance to believe that the universe was created for us, so its creator can have a relationship with us, and that this all-knowing being actually listens to us and concerns itself with us. Think about how there's a tiny fraction of a difference in the DNA between us and chimps. Think about what a huge difference that makes. We can't have meaningful conversations with chimps. To things that are vastly different than us, like tiny insects and bacteria, we are simply a force of nature. Any meaningful interaction impossible. And how much do you even care? Do you give a second thought to the ants you might be stepping upon as you walk? Now, think about how vastly different we would be from something that's so intelligent that it knows everything. It would be capable of caring about you as much as you're capable of caring about a dust mite. And yet, you're so arrogant as to think that the universe was created for you, or that this being made the ultimate sacrifice for you, or that this being listens carefully to your innermost desires and considers them intently. Consider the arrogance of the phrase, "I'll pray for you." It's designed to sound selfless, sure, but in actuality, it's someone who thinks they can invoke the consideration of the most intelligent, most powerful being in existence in a matter of something that's likely trivial in a world filled with grave concerns. And while this phrase might be used in earnest, it's often used as an attempt to offend. I have difficulty thinking of anything more arrogant. And of course, last but not least, if God and the afterlife doesn't exist, then why does anything matter, they say? As if intrinsic purpose is more important than derived purpose. But, for example, can't an unplanned pregnancy result in a child who is every bit as loved as a child who was planned? Yes, one day the sun will become a red giant, swallowing the earth whole, utterly destroying it long after life on this planet is already dead and gone. And even if we manage to somehow escape from our solar system, we're only delaying our demise until at the very latest the inevitable heat death of the universe. Then everything you ever said, ever wrote, ever experienced, everyone you ever loved will amount to nothing if there's no eternal God and no eternal afterlife. This is an extremely flawed way of thinking. This argument is based on the premise that only the future holds any sort of value. It fallaciously treats life like a mathematician who is concerned with only the product at the end of his problem. But life is a process, not a product at the end of a problem. We don't even have to take it as far as the heat death of the universe. Consider that most people who lived merely 100 years ago are already forgotten. The further back you go, the fewer are remembered. Do only those who are remembered matter? Do only those matter whose life work survive the test of time? What if you spent your life building something only for it to be destroyed and for you to die and then be swept into the dustbin of history? Was it all a waste? Do people like Aristotle and Shakespeare and Abraham Lincoln matter because their names and work will be remembered, whereas yours will not? The key to this depressing and rather arrogant line of thinking resides in what we mean when we say matter. Matter to whom? In order for something to matter, there must be a someone for that something to matter to affect. So in the end, after human civilization is long gone, there will be no mattering going on, at least not for human beings, because there will be nobody to matter to. That's not the point of mattering. The point of mattering is to affect someone. So in the here and now, I ask you, who are you affecting? That matters. That's why you matter. Because there is something called the present. You exist in it. And within it, you matter. So maybe some janitor alive today won't be remembered in 1,000 years, like a historical figure. But maybe there are people that janitor affects in the here and now like no other. That janitor could be the center of somebody's world. That's the thing about mattering. You could matter more abstractly to countless people throughout millennia, like Aristotle, or you could matter to a few people profoundly and concretely throughout 50 years. Guess what? Both feel the same. Aristotle never got to realize his impact. Both are still a form of mattering. And just because you end up as dust, that doesn't mean that the mattering didn't happen. Who cares about the future's dust? What matters is what happened. The religious people who ask this question of atheists, this if it all ends, if it all amounts to nothing, then why does anything matter? That question is asked by those who don't understand the most basic truisms of storytelling, and thus the story of your life. That it's not the destination, but the journey that truly matters. Your life matters because you and others are currently alive. In the future, when human beings no longer exist, not only won't you matter, but there will be no reason for you to matter. This worrying about not mattering in 1,000 years is such a ridiculous thing to concern oneself with. You even concern yourself over the fact that movies in 2018 aren't being put on VHS tapes anymore? There's no reason for them to be, and that's okay. Maybe you won't matter in 1,000 years, and that will be okay too, because you're doing your mattering right now, while you can actually experience it. That's the beauty of mattering. They confuse not mattering with never having mattered. Don't let them get away with that. Not only that, but you probably will matter a great deal in 1,000 years because of the butterfly effect. It's just that people probably won't know how you mattered. And I think that fact exposes one of the reasons this line of thinking affects people, because in actuality, they're probably not so much concerned with mattering as they are with recognition. Not only do they want to matter forever and always, but they want people to know why. They don't want to be the janitor. They want to be Aristotle. But now we get to the part where they are 180 degrees wrong. These religious people, what do they think they matter for? Their thoughts, their very motivations are for something that isn't even there. Can you think of more of a waste? They're living for an afterlife that will never come. They're living for a God who isn't there. They think they matter to God, but God isn't there. So the most important mattering to them is actually something that can't matter. Fortunately, religious people still matter for the same reason I do, because we affect other people. But the person to whom they want to matter the most, God, they actually don't matter at all. They place so much value on this thing that doesn't exist, at least certainly not in the way they imagine it. And meanwhile, the things they should be valuing the most, other people, are all around them and all too often ignored or undervalued. And then they turn to people like me, someone who is reveling and cherishing every moment because I understand it for its ephemeral, rare nature. They look at me and they ask, why does anything matter in your worldview? It's like a mouse asking an elephant, why are you so tiny? Just think about what would happen if we granted eternity. If we covered the entire surface of the earth with diamonds, how valuable would they be? Consider Parkinson's law, which essentially states that work expands to fill the time allotted to complete it. Eternity destroys meaning, and that is why they are 180 degrees in the wrong. When I was a kid, there was a small unattended video game arcade in a side room of the office building where my father worked. During summer break from school, I spent many long days with my dad in that office building. And my brother and I would occasionally beg my dad for quarters so we could go downstairs and play Pac-Man and Defender and Joust. And sometimes when we were hungry or thirsty, we had the great internal struggle over whether to use our quarters on the vending machines or the video games. When we played those games, every moment was precious and exciting. There was triumph and there was agony. There was always fun and excitement. But then one day it all changed. We thought it was the best thing that could have happened to us. We found some little keys hidden away in a drawer behind a nearby counter. Those little keys, we quickly discovered, opened the little front doors of the game cabinets, where the slots were, where you put your quarters. You could swing those little doors open and then flick the switch that's triggered by the quarters. So suddenly we had unlimited games with no quarters needed. Nowadays it would be like playing with developer commands, cheat codes, God mode. We played and played and played to our heart's content. Getting killed no longer mattered because we could just flick the switch and live again. It didn't matter. You know what that not mattering meant? Everything. It sucked the joy out of the most enjoyable thing in that office during those long summers. Those games were no longer exciting. They were boring. We stopped playing them. They no longer mattered. We thought free, unlimited games were the best thing that could have happened, but it was actually the worst, at least in terms of entertainment. If there is an everlasting God and an everlasting afterlife, then I've got just one question for you. Why does anything matter?